Good morning, students. Good morning to all. On last day, we have studied about the chapter 9 development experience in India. And on last day itself, the ninth has completed. And today, just we will go to the next chapter. So, today, just we will go to the next chapter, chapter 10 Rural Economics. So already we have studied many times about the rural economics and the urban economics. So totally, if you want to calculate the GDP in our nations, we have to adding the rural economies and the urban economics. Because most of the peoples in these rural sites are depending upon the agricultural, and in the primary sector of our nation is also the agricultural only. And how the economic development or what are the sources are there to improving the economic from the rural side is going to study by rural economics. The rural economics deals with the application of economic principles in understanding and developing the rural areas. So in rural areas, many of the new applications in economic principles is not available. But in our nations, many of the principles are there. And how the economic principles are going to applied in understanding the developing of rural side is going to studied by the rural economics. The rural areas are geographical areas located outside towns and cities. Which area is considered as a rural side means? So what are the areas are located the outsides of towns and cities are considered as a rural areas. So if you are seeing the rural areas, many of the peoples are involving in these agricultural sectors only. And there is no more transport facilities, there is no more infrastructure facilities. And many of the peoples also does not having the employment opportunity in these large scale industries because there is no large scale industries available, and many of the peoples may or may not have the sufficient educated peoples. So according to the census of India, the basic unit for rural areas is the revenue village. The basic unit for the rural area is the revenue villages. So from the village side, the governments are earning some of the income that is considered as a revenue village. Here the village officers only is considered as a authority persons. The rural economy refers to villages and rural community refers to the peoples living in villages. So we have to we have to keep in mind one thing. The rural community refers to the people living in the villages. How many of the peoples are the peoples those who are living in the village side, that people only is considered as a rural community. The rural areas have problems like backwardness of agriculture, low income, low employment opportunities, poverty, low infrastructural development, low literacy, low labor productivity, lower prices of agricultural products, surplus labor force, larger populations, high level of migrations and high dependency of the natural resources and nature. In this rural side, many of the natural resources are available, but the peoples does not know how we have to use that natural resources. And because of low literacy and low educated peoples, so many of the peoples will born or deliver the more children. So when they have more children, automatically they are going to fall into the poverty, and there is no more employment opportunities. Because of that, so the peoples also does not having the purchasing powers, and because of that their living standard also will be very low. And if they are not having the employment opportunities, they will not have the opportunities to high income. So always they will earning some of the low income as so as to fulfill their basic necessity of life only. And not only that, the low labor productivity only will be there, because there is no more opportunity to receiving the skillful development or the skillful training from any of the institutions. And not only that, even those peoples are involving in this agricultural land, that people also will have the lower price of their agricultural products, because some of the brokers and the agents and the middlemen also will come into their channel of distributions. So because of that, the surplus labor force also will be very low. So according to the 2011 populations census, there are 6,40,867 villages in India, and 68.84 percentage of the 121 crore total population live in rural areas. Next, just we will study about the features of rural economy. The rural economy also will have some of the specific features. So what are the features we can see it in the rural side or the rural economy mean? First, village is an institution. So if you are considering the rural side, the village only is considered as a institution. The village is a primary institution and it satisfies almost all the needs of the rural community. In this rural community, already we have studied the rural community mean the peoples, those who are all belonging in this rural economy, the rural areas, these peoples only considered as a rural communities. The rural communities always will get the satisfactions by producing the agricultural product from their agricultural land itself. So they will not have many of the needs. Most of the peoples always want to gathering some of the basic necessity of life only, that also will receiving from their agricultural productivity itself. And some of the peoples only will have some of the opportunity to establish the cottage or handicraft commodities. So the rural people have a feeling of belongingness and a sense of unity towards each other. So normally if you are going to the rural side peoples, so most of the peoples are depending upon each others, and always they will belonging or they will living with the unities. So we will never make any of the controversy among the peoples. Next, the dependency on agriculture. So most of the peoples always will be depending upon the agricultural only. But here we have to note one thing, some of the peoples may have some own land. Otherwise, those who are not having their own land, these peoples will going to the another one's land for the salary purpose only. The rural economy depends much on nature and agricultural activities. Agricultural activities mean, so we can tell many of the things. So the agricultural and agrarian industries and some of the cottage industries and some of the horticulture and so what are the industries and the jobs are coming under the agricultural related. So all these things are considered as a agricultural activity. The agricultural and allied activities are the main occupations in rural areas. Next, life of rural peoples. How the life is going on in the rural people of the rural areas is. The lifestyle in villages are very simple. So the public services like education, housing, health and sanitation, transport and communications, banking, roads and markets are limited and unavailable. So already we have studied, so many of the banks will not have take more responsibility to establish any of the banking sector in the rural side. But nowadays only many of the commercial banks are taking the responsibilities and interested to starting some of the banks in the rural areas, and but still some of the rural areas are not having the sufficient level of the education, housing, health and sanitation, transport facilities, communication facilities are there. So the rural people rely much on faith, superstitions, and traditional cultural practices. So we may see in some of the rural side peoples, they always believing the superstitious beliefs, and still they will not apply any of the the machineries in this agricultural land. They always believe the agricultural land as a lords, and still they are respecting the agricultural land and the agricultural occupations and the agricultural product also. The standards of living of majority of rural peoples are poor and pitiable, because they will never ready to coming up from the poverty, and what are the things are there still fell down in the poverties they will doing still. In terms of methods of production, social organizations and political mobilizations, rural sectors is extremely backwards and weak, because they will never get ready to coming up from the superstitious beliefs. For example, if they are receiving the material from the agricultural land, they will think it is the sin. So like that many of the problems are there. In recent years only, the incidence of alcohol drinking has gone up. Next, population density. How the population densities are there in these rural areas mean. The population density measured by the number of persons living per square kilometer is very low, and houses are scattered in the entire village. So in this urban side, if you are seeing any of the streets, all the housing are will be located at very closely, and many of the buildings are there. But in this rural side, if you are going to see, so many of the peoples are not having, so the peoples always will be scattered throughout the villages. Next, employment level. So there exists unemployment, the seasonal unemployment and underemployment in rural areas, because already we have studied the characteristics of seasonal unemployment. So in this agricultural only the seasonal unemployment will be existing, because if they are cultivate any of the crops, it will giving the yield two times per year, but the two times per year only they will get some of the income. The rest of the days they will not having the employment. So it is called as a seasonable employment. And underemployment mean even some of the peoples are some of the persons are having the education facilities, because of the superstitious beliefs they will never go to the migrations to the urban areas, and they will always want to living in the comfort zones. The unemployment refers to the situation of people with the willingness and ability to work, but it is not getting employment. So the decreased unemployment is a situation where people work, but is a situation where the people work no increase in production. Next, poverty. So the poverty is one of the peculiar characteristics of the rural side peoples or the rural economy. The poverty is a condition where the basic needs of the people like food, clothing and shelter are not being met. So the poverty is a situations where the peoples are not having the sufficient level of the power to earning the money to fulfill their basic necessity of life. So according to the 2011 and 12 estimates, about 20 crores of peoples in rural areas are poor, and they are live below the poverty line. Next, indebtedness. The people in rural areas are highly indebted owing to poverty and unemployment, lack of farm and non-farm employment. So opportunities, low wage employment, seasonality into production, poor marketing network, etc. So normally you have to understand one thing, how the poverty is created or how the poverty is arising mean. So because of the unemployment the poverty will arise, or because of the poverty the unemployment situations may be arise. So the famous British writer Sir Malcolm Darling states that an Indian farmer is born in debt, lives in debt, dies in debt, and bequeath debt. So since the formal loan facilities are not available for the villagers, they depend on local moneylenders who, like a parasite. So normally if any of the peoples not having the opportunities to borrowing the financial facilities from any of the bank, they have to in the need of depending upon the local moneylenders, they will fixing the high rate of interest, so that only the peoples are born in debt, live in debt, and die in debt, and bequeath a debt. Next, rural income. So the income of the rural people is constrained as the rural economy is not sufficiently vibrant to provide them with the jobs or self-employment opportunities. So if there is no chance to establish any of the industries, the people will not have the opportunities to receiving the employment, and the people also not having the interest to go to the work from the urban areas, and always they have to depending upon the agricultural, and from the agricultural sector also they will not having the sufficient level of the income. So the rural income always will be very low throughout the year. The large proportion of laborers and skilled persons are underemployed, and the scope of increasing their income is limited. If there is no employment opportunity, they will not have any possibilities to receiving the income. And not only that, so many of the peoples are in underemployed, they will get some limited income only. So whenever is going it like that, their purchasing power and their living standard always will be very low because of the low rural income. Next, dependency. The rural household are largely dependent on social grants and remittance from family members working in urban areas and cities. So if you are seeing in rural peoples, so all the peoples in one families are going to work and they will receiving some of the limited income. And not only that, in some of the families, all the members are depending upon any one of the leaders of the family. So these persons have to work hard, and even if they are taking more responsibility to working hard, they will never have the possibilities to earning the more income, because one's income only have to spend on the whole family. So automatically they are going to fall down in the poverty even if they are taking more work hard. Next next, dualism. The dualism means the coexistence of two extremely different features like developed and underdeveloped, organized and unorganized, traditional and modern, so regulated and unregulated, poor and rich, skilled and unskilled, and similar contradicting situations in the regions. So these characteristics are very common in the rural areas, because many of the peoples will have some one of the side, another one of the peoples are living another one type of the method. So the dualism is always existing in the rural economy. Next, inequality. The distribution of income, wealth and assets are highly skewed among the rural people. So there are number of historical, social, economic and political reasons behind the existence of inequality. So the income and the wealth and the assets also are highly skewed among the rural peoples. So always the inequalities are available in the rural side peoples. Next, the migrations. The rural peoples are forced to migrate from the villages to urban areas in order to seek a gainful employment for their livelihood. So even if you are seeing any of the cities, many of the peoples are coming from the rural sides only, because in the rural areas no employment opportunities, so the peoples are coming from the rural areas. So this character of the development gives rise to the information of cities. So enmity and lack of basic amenities in rural areas also boost the people to migrate to urban areas. So this is called double poisoning by Samaji. One side villages are empty, on the other side towns are congested. So the rural peoples are always will be as poor because of the migrations from the rural to urban areas. Okay, students, I think it's enough. So because of the mobile phone problem, so I will complete. So if you have any doubt, please ask me. And just to take the features of rural economy as your study portions. Thank you.